Hello everyone, welcome back to Everything Swift. Today we'll be tackling Leetcode question 253 titled Meeting Rooms Part 2. I actually did the part 1 in my previous video, so if you haven't checked it out, please feel free to check out that video because I think there are some pattern that we are going to use from that question in this video as well. So let's jump straight into this question and figure out what we have to do today. Basically, we are given a parameter here of a nested integer named intervals, basically representing the meeting times, and basically we are supposed to return the number of rooms required to organize this meeting essentially, and we want the minimum amount of rooms required. So let's take a look at this example here. Basically, the intervals is a nested array, and we have two index in all the subarrays, right? So the first index is basically representing the start time, and the second index is basically the ending time. So in this example here, the first meeting starts at time 0 and it ends at time 30, and then the second meeting is starting at time 5 and it ends at time 10, and the third meeting essentially starts at time 15 and ends at time 20. So given this time schedule, it is said that the answer is basically the minimum number of rooms required is basically 2. So the thought process to solve this problem is essentially we need to somehow compare the starting time and the ending time, right? Because the logical thinking is like just try and imagine that you're in the work office right now, and how would you determine whether you need another room, right? So if a meeting starts, essentially we need a room, and in this case, it's not specified here, but I guess the assumption is we cannot share the meeting rooms. Uh, so basically, whenever we encounter a new starting meeting time, we need an additional room, right? So to determine the minimum number of rooms, basically we can actually reuse the meeting room. But that can only happen whenever a meeting has ended. So if the meeting has ended, basically that people within the room will vacate the room, and basically that room is free to be used by any other subsequent meeting, right? So just to summarize, the thought process here is we have to somehow compare the starting time and ending time to actually know whether we need an additional room because a meeting has started, and basically whether we can reuse a meeting room because a room has been vacated by the people within the room, right? So how we're going to do that is actually we're going to split up the starting time and ending time into two separate arrays, and then we're going to look through both of them to figure out and compare the time value, uh, whether we need an additional room or we are going to decrement the number of rooms because the room has been freed up to be used again by another meeting, right? So that's basically the summary of like how we're going to solve this problem. So I'm just going to jump straight into the code, and hopefully that will clarify my explanation. So here we're going to check if intervals is empty. Basically we're just going to return 0 because there's no meeting scheduled, so we don't need any rooms. And as I said, the strategy here is to split the starting time and ending time into two separate arrays. So I'm just going to do start times equals to an integer array, and the same thing for ending times, which is end time. So to break them up, we're going to look through the intervals array here, and basically write the existing intervals. So I'm just going to call it current for short, intervals of I, and start times basically will append current of the first index, and the end times is appending the second index. So basically the first index represents the start time, as I explained, and the second index, which is index 1, is representing the ending time here, right? This one right here. So now that we have separated them into two separate arrays, we're just going to go ahead and sort them because we need to do the comparison accordingly, right? So just sort them, and end times we're going to sort them as well. So this comparison between the time values will indicate whether if we go through the start times, basically we will increment the number of rooms, and whenever we go through the end times, that signifies that a meeting has ended. So that means that room is going to be vacated, right? So we're going to decrement the count of the rooms. So to do that, we have to loop through both this array, but since we are not going to loop them at the same pace, we're going to use a starting pointer and an ending pointer to go through them. So var start equals to 0, var end equals to 0. And obviously we need the counter to count the number of rooms. So number of rooms is 0 at the start. Then we're just going to return this. So while start is less than intervals.count. Essentially what we're going to do here is basically in this while loop, we're just going to compare both the starting and ending times. Both the starting and ending times. So s time equals to start times of start, and end time is going to be end times of end. If start time is bigger than equals to end time, basically we're going to decrement the number of rooms. Number of rooms minus equals to 1, and we're going to increment the ending time. And at every iteration, we're just going to go through the next meeting. So the new meeting has started. So start equals to +1 to increment it, and the number of rooms will also be incremented because we are starting a new meeting, right? So that's basically it. I think this is the solution. So just to summarize it, actually let me just go ahead and run this just to make sure. I think I did it right. Looks good. I'm just going to submit this. That's the answer. So looks good. Okay, so the summary of this is essentially we basically loop through these intervals array here, nested array. We split them up into start and ending time. The reason for doing that is because we're going to do a comparison to figure out whether a meeting has started or ended. And whenever a meeting has started, we are going to increment the number of rooms. And then whenever we encounter the ending time of a meeting, we are going to decrement the number of rooms. And that's how we figure out the minimum number of conference room required, right? So looking at this example here, if we perform this three-step operation, what's going to happen is start times being sorted, we are going to get 0, 5, and 15. I'm using example 1 here, by the way. And end times will be, since it's also sorted, we are going to get 10, 20, and 30, right? So in this while loop here, we are going to compare both these array. We're going to loop through them, and whenever start time is actually smaller than it, or at every iteration, we're going to loop through the start time. But whenever we encounter the start time bigger than the end time, essentially the meeting time has ended. The meeting has ended, so we're going to increment the end time. And at the same time, since the meeting has ended, that means the room is now free to be used for the subsequent meetings, so we're going to decrement the number of rooms. So yeah, so hopefully this video is helpful enough for you guys to understand this question and how I solve it. So yeah, if you guys find this kind of video helpful, please feel free to subscribe to my channel. I'm trying to grow this channel. So thank you very much for your time. Take care, and bye bye.